The dim, cold room smelled of metal and decay. There in the corner sat an alien girl huddled in fear. Her wrists were bound, and her once beautiful skin was bruised and battered. Her eyes, large and bright, darted nervously from side to side as she watched every movement in the room. The walls were lined with iron bars, a cage she had been thrown into like an animal. Her thoughts raced. Was this how it would end? She had been sold, traded, taken from her home and her people. She had no idea what kind of fate awaited her, but she knew one thing for certain. There was no escape. What would they do to me now? She shuddered, her body sore from the rough treatment she had received. The humans had been cruel, forcing her into their strange ships, poking and prodding her, as though she were nothing more than a piece of property. She had hoped that being bought by a human would mean safety, but instead it only seemed to bring more fear. Then she heard footsteps. The sound echoed off the cold stone floor, growing louder with each passing second. Her heart began to pound in her chest. Is he coming for me? Her eyes widened as a shadow fell across the bars of her cage. A human. But this one was different from the others she had encountered. His appearance was nothing like the ones who had taken her. He was older, middle-aged, with graying hair and a weary expression. He wasn't dressed like the others either. He wore an explorer's uniform, weathered and torn from travel, yet there was something about him that made her feel uneasy. He stood there for a moment, just watching her, as if unsure of what to do. His face held no malice, only a strange mix of curiosity and concern. The alien girl backed into the corner, her heart racing. What does he want? He didn't say anything at first, but after what felt like an eternity, he spoke in a soft, calm voice. Are you all right? The words were unexpected. She blinked, confused. She had expected to hear commands, threats, or worse, but this was different. She remained silent, unsure of how to respond. Was this a trick? The human stepped closer, his hands raised in a non-threatening manner. I'm not here to hurt you, he said gently. I'm here to help. She didn't believe him. No human had ever shown her kindness, and she didn't see why this one would be any different. She had heard stories of humans who seemed kind at first, only to turn cruel once they had their way. She wasn't about to fall for the same trick again. Her thoughts turned darker. He's probably just another monster, waiting for the right moment to strike. I won't give him the satisfaction of seeing my fear. But still, there was something unsettlingly sincere about his voice, about his eyes. It made her wonder for a moment if maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. She looked up at him, but her distrust remained. The human didn't force the door open or try to grab her. Instead, he spoke again. I'll just leave you alone for now, he said, taking a step back. But I'll be back to check on you. The alien girl stayed still, too afraid to move. She waited, watching every step he took, listening carefully as he left the room. As the door clicked shut, a sudden silence filled the space. She was alone, again, but for the first time since her capture, she didn't feel the constant, overwhelming fear. She felt confused, but not terrified. What just happened? She glanced at the bars of the cage and then back at the door. What kind of human would treat her with such care? Was it possible that he truly didn't want to hurt her? But she quickly dismissed the thought. No, humans are cruel. He's just playing a game. Soon enough, he will show his true face. Still, she couldn't help but wonder if this time was different. Was this human different? She had no answers, only questions, and the cold, empty silence of the room pressing in on her. She closed her eyes and leaned against the bars, trying to rest. It had been a long journey and she was exhausted. Her body ached and her mind was filled with confusion and fear, but deep down she longed for one thing, a chance at peace. A chance to finally be free from the torment she had suffered. The human's words echoed in her mind. I'm not here to hurt you. Could it be true? Was there really a chance that her nightmare was over? Or was this just the beginning of another, more sinister chapter? Only time would tell, But for the first time in a long while, the alien girl allowed herself to drift off to sleep, the faintest glimmer of hope flickering in her chest. The alien girl awoke to a strange sensation, a warmth that she hadn't felt in so long. It wasn't the cold metal of the cage or the harshness of the humans who had tormented her. No, this was something different, something comforting. She opened her eyes slowly, the soft glow of a low lamp casting a gentle light over the room. It wasn't the stark, cold cell she had been kept in before. This room was smaller, but it felt safer. The walls were painted, not bare metal, and there was a bed, an actual bed, at the far end of the room. It was clean, soft, and inviting, a far cry from the filthy floor she had been forced to sleep on before. She sat up with a start, her body still weak and sore from the journey and the rough handling. Her eyes quickly scanned the room. The door was slightly ajar, but no one was in sight. She had no idea how long she had been asleep, but it felt like hours, maybe longer. Her stomach grumbled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten properly in what felt like an eternity. A door creaked open, and she froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Was it him again? The human who had bought her, who had seemed so different from the others, but still she wasn't sure if she could trust him. His voice from before still echoed in her mind. "I'm not here to hurt you." Could she believe it? The human stepped into the room carrying a tray in his hands. He paused when he saw her awake, his face softening with a look that she hadn't expected. Compassion. "I brought you something to eat," he said, his voice gentle but firm. He placed the tray on the small table beside the bed, then stepped back, giving her space. "I wasn't sure what you'd like, but I thought this might be good." She looked at the tray, unsure what to make of it. There was bread, fruit, and a small bowl of soup. Nothing extravagant, but it smelled fresh, real, like food meant for someone who mattered. The sight of it made her stomach twist, not from hunger, but from a mix of emotions she didn't fully understand. For a moment she couldn't speak. She just stared at the food. The idea of someone offering her something out of kindness so foreign to her that it left her speechless. This can't be real, she thought. No one does this. The human, noticing her hesitation, seemed to sense her unease. "You don't have to eat if you don't want to," he said. "I just thought you might be hungry." His voice was calm, sincere. There was no anger in it, no hidden threat. It was the kind of voice that made her feel uncertain, but in a way that wasn't entirely bad. For so long, she had been taught to fear humans. They were nothing more than monsters to her, abusers, dealers, and captors who only wanted to hurt. And yet here was one, offering food with no chains or whips in sight. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to flee. Her entire life had been built around survival, around avoiding being controlled or hurt. She had learned the hard way that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. But something was different. The tension in the air wasn't the same. This human wasn't rushing at her, demanding something from her, not like the others. Instead, he waited, not forcing her, but giving her the choice. "Why?" she finally managed to ask, her voice hoarse and unsteady. It had been so long since she had spoken to anyone that words felt strange in her mouth. "Why what?" the human asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Why are you doing this?" She glanced at the tray of food again, as though it were a trick, something dangerous hidden under the surface. "Why not hurt me like the others?" The human sighed, and for a moment his expression faltered. It was as though he was struggling with something, perhaps understanding her fear, or maybe something deeper. "I'm not like the others," he said softly. "I don't want to hurt you. I want to help." Her eyes narrowed in disbelief. "Help?" she repeated. "Why? What do you want from me?" He shook his head slowly, as if trying to make her understand something she wasn't ready to grasp. "I don't want anything from you. I'm not asking for anything in return. I can't stand to see someone suffer, not if I can help." The alien girl couldn't comprehend what he was saying. No human had ever been like this before. She had never met anyone who cared enough to speak to her like this, much less offer help. But the more she listened, the more she began to feel something she hadn't in years. A sense of hope, a dangerous feeling she wasn't sure she could trust. The human motioned toward the food again. "Please, eat. If you're ready," he said, his voice gentle. For a long moment the alien girl didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on the food, but she couldn't bring herself to touch it. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the strange, unfamiliar sensation inside her chest. Her instincts told her to refuse, to remain distant, to keep up the walls that had kept her safe for so long. But she was so tired, and the hunger gnawed at her from the inside. Slowly, almost cautiously, she reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the tray. The human took a step back, giving her all the space she needed. He didn't try to rush her. He just stood there watching her with a quiet patience, as though he understood that trust had to be earned, not forced. She picked up a piece of bread and took a small bite. It wasn't much, but it felt like the beginning of something. For the first time in so long, she wasn't filled with terror, but with something else. A small flicker of curiosity. Could he really be different? Could this human be the one to break the cycle of fear she had been trapped in for so long? As she chewed slowly, the human waited in silence. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the alien girl didn't feel entirely alone. The alien girl sat quietly at the small table, the last bite of bread still in her mouth. She glanced at the human standing by the door, unsure of how to interpret this situation. Her mind was still reeling from the strange kindness he had shown her. But more than that, there was something about him, something she couldn't quite place. It wasn't like the others. It was as though he genuinely wanted to help, even though he didn't have to. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't made any demands. He had simply cared for her. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. And it scared her. The human leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed, watching her closely but not intrusively. The tension between them was thick, a mixture of uncertainty and something else. Something she wasn't yet ready to acknowledge. She looked away, her gaze landing on the small window behind him. Outside, the dark sky stretched out endlessly, a vast emptiness that mirrored the uncertainty in her heart. She couldn't allow herself to feel this way. She had been taught her whole life that trust was dangerous, that kindness was a weakness, and that anyone who showed it was either naive or deceitful. The world had made sure of that. It had shown her time and time again that humans were nothing but predators. Yet here she was, sitting in a room with a human who hadn't harmed her, who hadn't tried to control her. "Do you feel better?" the human asked, his voice soft, breaking through her thoughts. She hesitated before answering. "I don't know," she replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt this before, not from a human." He raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You mean kindness?" She nodded slowly, unwilling to admit the confusion she felt. Kindness was a foreign concept to her, one that didn't belong in the world she had known. Yet here it was, sitting in front of her like a puzzle she couldn't solve. "I understand," the human said, his voice gentle. "It's hard to believe, especially after everything you've been through." The alien girl's eyes narrowed, slightly. "You don't know what I've been through," she said, her tone sharp. "You can't." The human took a step forward, his expression sympathetic but resolute. "No, I can't. But I can try to understand," he said. "I know I'm not like the others, and I know that I can't change what's happened to you, but I can promise that I won't hurt you." Her eyes flickered toward him. There it was again, the sincerity in his voice, the calmness in his demeanor. She didn't know how to react. Her instincts screamed at her to reject him, to push him away, to run if she could. But something else held her back. A small, fragile hope she didn't want to acknowledge. Could she trust him? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and fears. The alien girl looked down at her hands, trying to steady her racing thoughts. What was she supposed to do? How was she supposed to handle this? The human had given her food, given her a safe place to rest, but could she truly let her guard down? Was she ready to believe that someone, especially a human, could be trusted? The human seemed to sense her inner turmoil. "I don't want to push you," he said softly. "But I want you to know you're not alone anymore. You don't have to be afraid of me." She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat growing. Afraid of him? She had been afraid of humans her entire life, and now, after everything she'd been through, was she really supposed to stop being afraid of this one? Could she? Her gaze met his, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't expected. Vulnerability. It was fleeting, but it was there. He wasn't invincible. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man trying to do what he thought was right. "I don't know what to believe," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I've never known anyone like you." He nodded, understanding. "I know it's hard to believe, but I'm not asking you to trust me all at once. I'm just asking for a chance." The alien girl looked down again, her heart heavy with uncertainty. A chance? She had been given chances before, only to have them ripped away. What if this was just another trick? What if this human was like all the others, pretending to be kind while planning something darker? But another part of her, a part she hadn't felt in so long, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't like the others. Maybe this human could be different. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pushed the tray of food aside, standing up slowly, her legs weak but steady. She took a few cautious steps toward the window, her breath shallow as she looked out into the dark horizon. The world beyond seemed so distant, so vast, yet so unreachable. How had she ended up here? How had everything in her life led to this moment, standing in a room with a human who wasn't like the ones who had hurt her? "You don't have to answer right away," the human said from behind her. "I know you're scared, and I know it'll take time." His words seemed to hang in the air, filling the room with an emotion she couldn't quite name. But it wasn't fear. Not this time. It was something softer, something that made her chest ache in a way she hadn't expected. For the first time, in as long as she could remember, the alien girl felt the smallest spark of something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. Days passed since the alien girl had first woken up in the strange, comforting room. Each morning, the human came with food, never pushing her to speak or to move faster than she was ready. He was patient, his eyes always filled with a quiet understanding that confused her. Despite her growing curiosity about him, she remained distant, careful not to get too close. She didn't want to believe that he was truly different. It was too dangerous. If she allowed herself to trust him, she would be vulnerable to betrayal, to pain, and to more suffering. She had already lost so much, and she couldn't risk losing her heart again. But the human wasn't like the others, was he? He had never raised his voice, never demanded anything from her. He had given her space, allowed her to eat in peace, and offered her warmth without expecting anything in return. Still, that nagging feeling in her gut, the fear of being betrayed, never left. One evening after dinner, the human returned with a different kind of invitation. He entered her room slowly, as usual, but this time there was a different energy about him. His hands were empty and his face wore a more serious expression. He stood at the door for a moment, studying her with a gaze that seemed to search for something she wasn't ready to give. "I know you've been through a lot," he began, his voice soft but heavy with concern. "And I can't imagine what it's like for you. But I want you to know that you don't have to hide from me. You don't have to be afraid of me." The alien girl's pulse quickened, her breath shallow. Not afraid? How could she not be afraid? For as long as she could remember, fear had been her constant companion. Fear of being captured, of being hurt, of being controlled. Fear of everything she couldn't predict. She turned her face away from him, not wanting him to see the weakness in her eyes. "I won't fall for this," she told herself. "No human can be trusted. Not even him." The human, sensing her resistance, took a step forward, but stopped himself. He didn't push. He didn't try to force her to talk. Instead, he stood silently, watching her, as though giving her time to gather her thoughts. It was as if he knew that forcing her to trust him would only make things worse. The silence stretched, on between them thick and heavy. The alien girl's heart raced as she struggled to hold on to her defenses. But as she sat there avoiding his gaze, something inside her cracked. A small, quiet voice deep in her chest began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't lying. "I just want to help you," he continued, his voice almost pleading now. "I'm not like the others. I know you've been hurt, but I won't hurt you. I can't promise to undo what's been done, but I want to try to make things better if you'll let me." She swallowed hard. The sincerity in his words stung, cutting deeper than she expected. Her body shook slightly, not from fear, but from something else. Something unfamiliar and terrifying. What if he's telling the truth? What if he really does want to help? The alien girl clenched her fists. She couldn't allow herself to hope. Not yet. But she couldn't push away the nagging thought that, for the first time in her life, someone might actually want to help her. Not as a slave, not as an object, but as a person. "I don't know how to trust you," she said softly, her voice strained as she fought back the flood of emotions she didn't want to feel. "How can I? I've been lied to, hurt by people who said they cared." The human's face softened. His eyes filled with understanding, but there was something else there too. Something that seemed to reach out to her. Compassion. A look that told her he truly meant it. "I know," he said, his voice quieter now. "I know how hard it is. But I'm not asking you to trust me all at once. I'm just asking for a chance, a small one, to prove that I'm not like the others." The alien girl's eyes watered, but she quickly blinked them away, refusing to show weakness. "You can't do this," she told herself. "You can't let him in." But the more she told herself that, the harder it became to believe. For a long time they stayed in silence, neither of them moving. The room felt so small, and yet her emotions made it seem so vast, so overwhelming. She wanted to run away, to lock herself back in the cage of her mind, but there was something different about this man, something that was slowly breaking down the walls she had spent so long building around herself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she looked up at him, her voice trembling as she spoke again. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered. "I don't know if I'm ready to believe that you won't hurt me." The human nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this. "I understand. I'm not asking you to trust me right away. But if you can give me a chance, I promise I won't hurt you." Her heart pounded in her chest as his words settled in her mind. What if he's telling the truth? What if this was the beginning of something different, something better? Could she allow herself to hope for a future that didn't involve pain, fear, and captivity? The alien girl stood up, her legs still shaky but determined. She crossed the room, stopping just a few feet from the human. She looked him in the eyes, searching for any sign of deceit. But there was nothing, only the same quiet sincerity she had seen in him from the very beginning. "I'll give you a chance," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But don't make me regret it." The human smiled then, a small, gentle smile that somehow made her heart race even faster. "You won't," he promised. As he turned to leave, she stood there, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The walls she had spent so long building were starting to crack, and she couldn't help but wonder, was this the start of something new? Was this the beginning of her freedom? She didn't know the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to wonder if there was hope after all. The alien girl woke up the next morning feeling different. The room seemed brighter, the air less heavy. Perhaps it was just the faintest hint of hope growing inside her, but it felt like something had shifted. Something had changed. She glanced over at the human, who was sitting in the corner of the room quietly reading a worn book. His presence no longer made her feel threatened. She had spent so many days in constant fear, trying to anticipate every moment, every word. But now, with him, there was a strange calmness she couldn't explain. The tension that had filled the room before had slowly dissipated, replaced by an unspoken understanding. For the first time since she'd arrived, She found herself wondering what it might be like to trust him. Just a little. The human looked up from his book when he noticed her stirring. He didn't say anything at first, just gave her a small, reassuring smile and then went back to reading. He hadn't forced her to speak. He hadn't pushed her to do anything. And that was the strange part. In the past, everyone had wanted something from her, had expected her to perform or comply in ways that kept her on edge. But not him. She sat up in the bed, feeling the weight of her own hesitation. There was so much she didn't understand. She had spent so much of her life locked away, her worth measured only by what others could take from her. And now here with this human there were no chains, no whips. There was only a quiet, constant presence. But could she trust it? Could she trust him? "I'm not going anywhere," the human said, as if reading her thoughts. He looked up from his book, meeting her gaze. His eyes were kind, open. "You don't have to be afraid." She frowned, feeling the unease return. Afraid? She hadn't realized she was afraid, at least not until now. His words brought back all the doubts that had been swimming in her mind. What if he's just pretending? What if he's waiting for the right moment to betray me? She swallowed hard and pushed the thoughts aside. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. Her voice was thick with emotion, a weight she hadn't expected. "I don't know how to trust. I've never had anyone to trust." The human closed the book with a soft thud and placed it on the table beside him. He stood and walked toward her, his movements slow, careful. "I know," he said, his voice low. "I don't expect you to trust me right away. I just want you to know that I'm not going to hurt you." The alien girl stiffened, but this time the fear didn't feel as suffocating. Her heart wasn't racing with panic as it had in the past. Why? Why is this different? He knelt down in front of her, just far enough to give her space, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "You've been through a lot," he said, his voice so gentle it almost made her want to crumble. "But you're not alone anymore. You don't have to hide or be afraid of me." She didn't respond. Instead, she looked away, her eyes wandering to the window. The morning light filtered through the glass, casting soft shadows on the floor. The silence between them was heavy, but it didn't feel like it had before. It felt different, more peaceful. She let out a deep breath, feeling her chest tighten. She didn't know what to do with the emotions that had started bubbling up inside her. She had spent so much time fighting, surviving, trying to protect herself. And now, there was this strange, gentle man who wasn't asking her to fight. He was asking her to believe. The alien girl stood up slowly, moving away from the bed. Her legs were still weak from the journey, but the human didn't rush to help her. He simply waited, giving her time. She appreciated that. "I don't know if I can believe you," she said, her voice shaking. "I've been lied to for so long. I don't know how to stop being afraid." The human watched her, his gaze steady, unwavering. "I'm not asking you to stop being afraid. I'm asking you to take one small step toward trusting me. You don't have to do it all at once. Just take one step." She felt the weight of his words settle in her chest, a tug that was both painful and relieving. A step, that's all it would take. One small step. The idea seemed so simple, but it terrified her. Could she really take it? Could she allow herself to step out of the shadows and into the light, even if she wasn't sure where it would lead? The human smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly. "I'll be here, every step of the way. You can take your time." For a long moment, the alien girl stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. The walls she had built around herself felt like they were crumbling, piece by piece. She had never allowed anyone, inside never let anyone close. But here he was, a human, offering her something she had thought impossible, compassion without conditions. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly. Maybe I can trust him. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a certainty. But it was a beginning. She turned back to face him, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll try," she said, her words heavy with emotion. "I'll try to trust you. But don't make me regret it." The human's smile deepened and he nodded. "You won't, I promise." The alien girl felt a strange warmth fill her chest, a feeling that was both terrifying and beautiful. Maybe this was the chance she had been waiting for. Maybe this time, things could be different, and for the first time in a long time she allowed herself to believe. The days blurred together as the alien girl began to feel something she hadn't in years. Comfort. She was starting to believe that this human wasn't like the others. He had kept his word. He had given her space when she needed it, food when she was hungry, and most importantly, patience. Yet, with every passing day, the walls she had built around herself began to crumble. She had told herself she would never trust another human, never let them into her heart again. But the more she interacted with him, the more it felt like she was breaking her own promise. And the fear she'd lived with for so long was slowly being replaced with something else, something she couldn't quite identify. She wasn't ready to face it yet, but she knew it was there. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the room, the human approached her. He had a serious look in his eyes, and it made the alien girl pause in her movements. She was sitting by the small window, staring out at the unfamiliar landscape. Her mind, as always, was spinning with thoughts and questions. He had been kind, yes, but was there more to his story than he was letting on? "Can we talk?" he asked gently, as if sensing her inner turmoil. The alien girl nodded, though she had no idea what this conversation would bring. She followed him over to the small table in the center of the room. He sat down across from her, his expression soft but determined. "I need to tell you something," the human said, his voice low and serious. Her heart skipped a beat and she straightened, suddenly alert. What could it be? She thought. She wasn't sure if she was ready for another betrayal, another painful truth. "I've been holding something back," he continued, taking a deep breath. "And I think you deserve to know the truth." The alien girl felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had feared this moment, the moment when the kind facade would crack and the true darker intentions would reveal themselves. Her body tensed, ready for the inevitable. "Before I bought you," the human paused, struggling with the words. "Before I found you, I had my own reasons for being in that place. I've spent my life searching for something, someone." The alien girl frowned, confused. Someone? The idea that this human might be searching for someone was foreign to her. She had seen humans as merciless beings, only interested in controlling or using others. It had never occurred to her that they might have personal reasons for their actions. "I know this sounds strange, but I wasn't looking for a slave," he went on. "I was looking for a lost child. I thought I was saving someone. But then I saw you. And everything changed." Her heart raced in her chest, confusion clouding her thoughts. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain calm. "Who were you looking for? Why me?" The human lowered his gaze for a moment before meeting her eyes once again. "I've been searching for my daughter," he said, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "She was taken from me, sold as part of an alien slave trade. I didn't know where she was, but I knew she was out there somewhere. And when I saw you, I thought you were her." The words hit the alien girl like a blow to the chest. His daughter? She sat there, frozen, trying to process what he had just said. He had been looking for his daughter, and when he found her, he had found her in the form of a broken alien slave. The pieces didn't fit. How could he think she was his daughter? She wasn't even human. He saw the confusion on her face and quickly added, "I know this is a lot, but I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean for you to become part of this story. You are not my daughter, but when I saw you, I couldn't turn away. I couldn't leave you in that place. I knew I had to protect you." The alien girl's mind raced. He thought I was his daughter? She stared at him, unsure of what to believe. The more he spoke, the more her thoughts tangled. She had never thought that someone would act out of love for another being. But this human, this stranger had done just that. He had acted without asking for anything in return, without even knowing who she was. "But why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Why keep this a secret?" "I didn't know how to tell you," he said, quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "I was afraid you'd run away, or that you would think I was trying to manipulate you. But the truth is, I'm here because I couldn't bear the thought of another life being lost in that system, and when I saw you, I knew I couldn't just walk away." The alien girl was silent for a long time, her mind spinning with his words. She had been so sure that all humans were the same, greedy, self-serving, and cruel. Yet this human, this man, had shown her something completely different. He wasn't like the others. He had risked everything to try to save someone, even when that someone wasn't his own flesh and blood. "You saved me," she whispered, almost to herself. "But you thought I was someone else." He nodded slowly, his eyes soft with understanding. "I did, but it doesn't change the fact that I want to protect you. I care about you, and I want to help you find a new life away from the pain you've known." The alien girl swallowed, feeling the walls around her finally start to crack. She had never allowed anyone to care for her, not like this. She had been told all her life that trust was a weakness, that kindness was a trap. But here she was, struggling to hold on to the very thing she had feared most. Was this really the beginning of something different? She didn't know, but for the first time she allowed herself to hope. Maybe there was a future beyond the cage, beyond the pain. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for not giving up on me." The human's face softened with a quiet smile. "I won't, and I promise you, we'll figure this out together." The alien girl felt something stir in her chest, something warm and unfamiliar. It was hope, fragile and uncertain, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. Maybe there was a chance for a new life after all. The alien girl stood in front of the door, her heart racing, as the soft light from the rising sun filtered in through the small window. It had been several days since the human had revealed his true reasons for bringing her here, why he had saved her, despite the confusing and unexpected circumstances. She had spent so much time wrestling with her emotions, trying to reconcile the person she had thought he was with the person he had shown her he could be. He wasn't the monster she had feared. He wasn't like the others who had taken her, used her, and abandoned her when they were done. He was different. And slowly, she was beginning to see that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of the past with her forever. Maybe for once she could allow herself to believe in something better. The human had kept his word, time and time again. He had never pushed her too hard. He had never tried to rush her healing or force her to trust him. He had simply been there, patient, kind and understanding. It was a kindness that even now she struggled to comprehend. She had spent so much of her life hiding, closing herself off from others out of fear. Fear that if she allowed herself to care, if she allowed herself to hope, it would all be ripped away. She had been told she was nothing, treated like a mere object to be used and discarded, and now here she was, standing in front of the door of her new life, unsure of what the future held. The human had asked her to step outside, to leave the confines of the room, the walls she had known so well, and face the world beyond. And yet, the thought of stepping out into the unknown was terrifying. What if she wasn't ready? What if she failed? A soft knock on the door broke her thoughts, and she turned to face the human, who was standing just outside, looking at her with quiet concern. He had never rushed her, never demanded she face anything before she was ready, but now, his gentle voice called out to her, filled with that familiar warmth that had come to comfort her over the past few days. "Are you ready?" he asked, his tone soft but with a trace of hope in it. The alien girl swallowed hard, the words catching in her throat. She wasn't sure if she was ready. She had been locked away for so long, physically and emotionally. It felt like stepping into a completely different world, a world where pain, fear, and isolation had no place. It felt too good to be true. Could she really leave the past behind? But as she looked at him, she saw something in his eyes. Something she hadn't seen in anyone else's. It wasn't pity or disdain or even kindness for the sake of kindness. It was a promise. A quiet promise that he would be there with her every step of the way. She took a slow, deliberate step toward the door, her legs still unsteady beneath her. Her mind raced with all the what-ifs that had been haunting her since the first day she had stepped into this place. But with each step, her uncertainty started to fade. Just a little. With each step, the weight on her chest grew lighter. When she reached the door, she hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering above the handle. The fear, the deep, gnawing fear, was still there, lingering at the edge of her thoughts. But it wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. She wasn't alone anymore. She didn't have to face it all by herself. Just one step at a time, she whispered to herself, as if repeating the words would give her the strength to move forward. With a deep breath, she turned the handle and opened the door. The sunlight hit her skin immediately, warm and inviting. The world outside was quiet, peaceful, as though it had been waiting for her. It wasn't the same cold, hostile place she had imagined. It was a world full of possibilities, new opportunities, new beginnings. For the first time, she stepped outside, and as she did, the human was there beside her, standing just a step behind. His presence was like an anchor, steady and unwavering. He didn't rush her, didn't try to push her forward. He just stood there with her, silently supporting her, allowing her to take it all in at her own pace. "Look at it," he said softly, gesturing toward the horizon. "It's yours too. You're free to make it whatever you want." The alien girl looked out at the landscape before her. The sky was a soft blue, dotted with streaks of orange and pink from the early morning light. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of earth and something unfamiliar, something that smelled like hope. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. Free to make it whatever I want. The idea seemed almost impossible, like something out of a dream. But the more she stood there, the more she realized it was true. She could create something different for herself. She didn't have to live in fear anymore. Her heart fluttered with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was the moment. The moment where everything could change. Turning to face the human, she found him watching her with quiet patience. His eyes, though tired, were full of understanding. He wasn't asking for anything from her, not yet. He was simply offering her the chance to be free, to have a life that wasn't defined by her past. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, filled with the unspoken bond that had formed between them over the last few days. And in that silence, the alien girl finally understood something that she hadn't been able to grasp before. The freedom to move forward, to trust again, was hers to take. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady now, filled with a quiet resolve. "I'm ready to start over." The human's smile widened and he nodded. "Then let's go. Together." And as they walked side by side, the alien girl couldn't help but feel that, for the first time in a long time, she was finally stepping into a future she could shape for herself. A future filled with possibilities, not fear.